all this time thinking of me. How come you're not there when you got me? I know that you're busy, so make the time. If you want this with me, do me right. I could be somewhere else, but I'd rather be with you. And that's what I call time well spent. So what do you call it when you're with me? Is it time well spent? So what do you call it when you're with me? Is it time well spent? You took all this time thinking you'd be playing on my mind like you should be. You know when you miss me, I'm hard to find. So when you are with me, love me blind. I could be somewhere else, but I'd rather be with you. And that's what I call time well spent. So what do you call it when you're with me? Is it time well spent? So what do you call it when you're with me? Is it time well spent? So what do you call it when you're with me? Oh, is it time well spent? So what do you call it when you're with me? Is it time well spent?
Cruising my way down
you got me tripping all over my shoes. Yeah, I'm falling for you. Ain't nobody like you. Ain't nobody like you. Tripping all over my shoes, yeah, I'm falling for you. Ain't nobody like you, yeah, you got me. Tripping all over my shoes, yeah, I'm falling for you. Ain't nobody like you.
Check 1 and 2. Check 1, 2. Let me get this camera going. And there we go. Hello, hello, hello. To whomever may be in chat at this point. Currently I see only one viewer. No worries. No worries. So to get things started today or this evening, I'm going to be just editing some photos and chilling with whoever might tune into chat. I have a whole bunch of photos that have kind of piled up over the last year, just never got around to editing them. And so I figure what better opportunity, and hopefully whoever tunes in can pick up a skill or two with regards to Photoshop. So without further ado, let me jump right into it. Let's get to display. So right now I've got Bridge open, so let me just get to the photo I'm going to work on first. This is from, let me check the metadata once I get to the photo. Our photo we're working with today is this one right here, which is actually a photo of my friend Jess from an art battle, or an art crawl here in Hamilton. Let's see, when was the photo made? We're looking at January, February, March, April, May. We're looking at late spring of last year. So it's definitely been some time. I've been meaning to get around to this photo just because I feel like just the composition of it, I have some cool opportunities for editing. I'll also ask you to forgive any minor color deviations, anything that looks slightly off. My monitor is not exactly calibrated very well, so everything is a bit warmer than usual. So if everything seems cool on your end, that's because it actually is, and I'm seeing it wrong. But let's get right to it. So I'm going to open it up and see if there's anything more I can do in Camera Raw. There we go. So there's honestly not a ton to do here. I've already done the correction as far as the color temperature, the white balance on this. For the most part, there's more I could do, but I'll clean it up in Photoshop itself. My goal ultimately is I really want to play with the color of the paint sample that she's holding and the actual color of her eyes. So I'm going to be really brightening up that area as well. I'll clean up some hair, I'll clean up the background a little bit. I'll get everything nice and even. So let's do this. I'll bring my contrast down a little bit so that in her eye sockets that shadow isn't too prominent. And let's bring down our highlights. Let's leave our highlights where they were. Everything else we'll do in post. So let's get this image open. Also, pardon me for one moment. There we go. Back to Photoshop. So, actually switch over to my tablet instead of my mouse. So I think the first thing I'm going to do with this photo is fix up just this little bit of hair over here, some loose hairs on her jacket. I'll get that cleaned up real quick. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to open up layers. I'm going to make a new layer separate from my background. And then I'm going over to, in this case, either my clone stamp tool or my spot healing brush. I'll be working with both on this layer to kind of work out some of these stray hairs. So let's zoom in a little bit. A bit too close. There we go. So what's awesome about this spot healing brush is that once I make it a tad smaller, a little bit more, there we go. I can just draw over the hair, and once it loads, it'll mostly vanish. I'll get these occasional artifacts in here, and I can just draw right over them to get rid of them. So the more I can do these in single strokes and just take out entire sections, the better. Just because clone stamp is a tad more finicky. And most of these little imperfections actually won't be noticed all that much once I zoom out. Let's see. Oh, we got someone in chat. Layla. Hey Layla. How's it going? Thank you. Yeah, I'm trying to be very precise. I'm trying to get rid of all these loose little hairs. What's also awesome about this is because I'm working on a separate layer, what I can do is I can reduce the opacity if I just want to kind of make them more faint. So I bring it down to opacity of, let's see, 76. It's much more faint. It's not necessarily completely gone. And sometimes that feels more natural. In this case, what I'm going to do now is I'm moving over to my clone stamp tool, and I'm going to hold Alt to choose a selection and use that as my frame of reference, my main point of editing, to kind of stamp on. So if I grabbed from here and placed it here, you get this big spot. I'm going to remove that though. What this helps me with is things like on the edge here, where I don't want this dark artifact, but I also want to keep the nice clean edge of my paint sample. I can sample from that edge. And as long as I place it cleanly on that edge, there we go. When I move further down, got a nice clean edge to work with. And I'll do the same thing with this corner here. I'm going to get even more precise for that one. So much so, things are starting to get real grainy. Now I can reduce the size of my stamp tool. There we go. I think that's about as precise as I'm going to get with that. Oh, yeah, let me back out, show you the whole image. Control minus. There we go. This is a shot of my my friend Jess. We shot at I think it's a used furniture store. We were at an art crawl in Hamilton, my hometown. And what I'm really trying to do with this shot is I'm trying to play off of the color of her eyes and the color of this paint sample right here. So we'll be getting to that in a little bit. First, I just want to get rid of some of these stray hairs. There we go. Use this clone stamp, get rid of this big blotch here. Not quite. What's also awesome about having this on a layer is if something goes kind of pear-shaped, I can. What camera do I use? I use, for this shot, it was my Sony a7R II, which is actually the camera I'm using for my webcam right now. Yeah, I've had that for about a couple of years now, year and a half. Before that, I was shooting on a Canon Rebel, so definitely a big upgrade moving to this guy. Now I'm switching, I'm on my eraser, but I've switched brushes so that I can get this nice little kind of fade here. There we go. What I am going to do at the end of all this, I'm going to add some grain to this layer. That way it matches the noise on my original photo. But for now, I'm not going to worry about that all that much. I'm just going to do a real rough pass on all these hairs. See, like that. You see little bits of it, but for the most part that hair completely vanished, which is awesome. The thing to keep in mind when you're using this tool is that you want to make sure you're set up here to content aware. That's what will allow it to and make sure it samples all layers. It'll allow it to sample all the layers below it, and will allow it to figure out that, yes, indeed, that's a hair we need to remove. Some of the other settings aren't too friendly, at least for removing hair like this. They have their own uses. So yeah, today we're just going to chill and edit a couple of photos. Feel free to edit along, or just go ahead, ask questions in chat. I'm hoping more people will tune in. If not, that's cool. At the end of the day, this gives me an excuse to edit all these old photos. Don't want that one. That's a bit better. Sometimes you have to make a couple of passes. There's no problem with that. Thank you. Again, that is, yeah, Layla. Thank you very much. For as far as photography goes, I'm more or less self-taught. I've taken the odd class, but a lot of this is just trial and error. I'm Well, I'm a journalism student, right? Or was. But yeah, videography, photography, editing. It's a lot of things like this, tutorials, live streams, just learning the basics from whoever's willing to talk about it. And picking people's brains. There's nothing better, in my opinion, than being able to go to one of my professors, at least when I had professors. It was always nice to be able to go to them and just ask questions. And the good ones would be more than happy to answer, which is something I try to emulate in my classes. There we go. So now, when I back out, suddenly those hairs are pretty much gone if I flick that layer on and off. There's definitely a bit of cleaning to be done with the background, but for the most part, anyone who'd never seen the original photo, there's not a ton going on there that looks out of place, especially because the background's so out of focus. So the only other adjustments I'm going to make, I've got a couple stray hairs up top I want to deal with, and then just a couple on her jacket, which shouldn't be a tough one because it's so dark. I'm going to get rid of these stray little highlights up here. And there's a chance that once I'm done other edits on this, these edits will need to be cleaned up even more as I change highlights and lowlights. Some things may be revealed up here. I did not mean to do that one. So even this hair, which goes over other hair, might... Yep, I was able to go right over it. I didn't really lose anything from the main head of hair, right? Go over there. All gone. This, when I learned this tool, okay, so getting back to that idea in a moment, you'll see that I just drew over this hair here and suddenly all these hairs have no end. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to my eraser tool and just bring those guys back. There we go. And what's awesome is I have my eraser set to pressure sensitive, so the more I press, the more opacity there is. So I can be really gentle and just bring back a little bit if I want to. I also did bring back a bit of that first hair I removed, so I'll quick get rid of that. Oh. There we go. There, I'm not too worried about that. What was I saying? Oh yes, when I first learned about this spot healing tool to deal with stray hairs, well, I fell in love with it immediately. It's so simple to use once you know how to set it up, or once you have it set up. It pretty much stays the same way unless you download a new version of Photoshop. So I fell in love with it immediately, but I also, the first head of hair I started editing was I started editing a photo of my friend Brianna, and well, she has very curly hair, very frizzy hair compared to Jess's straight hair in this photo. So I spent hours and hours trying to fix frizz, and frizz is a nightmare. I can't imagine having to deal with it as far as styling it every day. I can speak to editing in that it's terrible. There we go, get rid of this one. And we didn't lose any chain, good. That's always what I'm worried about. And so that's what I look to. Like, first I'll look to see that all the hair is gone, but I'll also double check anything I was working around to see if it needs to be fixed up. What I'm going to see is if I can pull this hair out and leave a shadow behind. Yeah, I'd call that passable. Okay, let's see. I don't want to get rid of all the frizz, or all the stray hairs, because not all of them are intrusive. So this button's something I'm probably going to have to fix with, yeah. So let's go back. Jumped too far back. Let's step forward. There we go. I'll probably just cut this hair off at the button rather than worry about getting rid of it over the button. That's not exactly something we're paying a lot of attention to. I am going to get rid of this one that just touches her cheek, because I'd like a nice clean line there. Yep, her cheek's fine. Sometimes I have to make a couple passes, but more or less, that's not bad. I'm going to get rid of these little ones in here too. Might as well. There's this nice dark background as a background, so I'm not going to, or I shouldn't run into too many problems with like weird artifacts. There we go, that's nice and clean. I'm going to now see about getting rid of this hair here, this one here, and this one that runs all the way down her forehead. So I'll start with this guy here. It's not too bad. A little bit of eyelash still left. So what I'll do is go back to my eraser and just lightly help if I was using the right tool. I went to clone stamp. I'm going to go to my eraser and just lightly brush over that. I'd rather that little bit of hair be there and her eyebrows be intact, rather than cut her eyelashes. Instead eyebrows. Rather than cut her eyelashes off, I'd rather have that little bit of hair there. Let's see what we can do with this one long hair. And yes, she does have very nice eyes, and we're going to apply a couple of techniques to really bring out some brightness and some color in them. Hopefully, well, we should get to that point today at the very least. Let's see what the computer does with that. Yeah, it doesn't always love these long streaks. What we did do was up top here worked pretty well. So I'm just going to erase this bottom section that didn't turn out so nicely. Okay, let's work on it in little bits. First, there we go, that section's gone. Let's get a bit closer. Ooh, a bit close. Sometimes if we go over once or twice, the eyebrows actually come back. In this case, they're not, so I'm going to apply a different technique. I'm going to go again to my clone stamp tool. I'm going to make it pretty small. Let's do 15 pixels. Yeah. There we go. The keyboard disappeared. So I'm going to sample just up from where the actual hair is. So I'm going to click. There we go. And I'm just going to draw down. This isn't a perfect technique, but you'll notice as I'm going over the hair, we're filling in with bits of eyebrow. which is good. It's exactly what we're looking for. At this point, things aren't quite aligned, so I'm going to resample. Hold Alt, click up from where the eyebrow is, or from where the hair is. Then when I move down, everything's pretty much lined up. What I do want to experiment with, just reminded myself, in the future is whether or not this can be a technique used to kind of make eyebrows a bit fuller. What's awesome is from what I'm seeing on my capture computer, it's all looking pretty good. On my main one, it's a little bit grainy. So you'll see when I press, not when I press and hold, when I click, this little plus appears. That plus is telling me where I'm sampling from. So in this case, now that everything's to the side, now that the hair is to the side of what we want to sample from, I'm going to resample and readjust my brush. Except I sampled and didn't move. So this is entirely based on where I sample and then where I click to place. Everything works from there. There we go. I'd say that eye, or that hair, is pretty much completely gone. The integrity of our eyebrow is practically the same. You wouldn't notice if you hadn't seen the original, right? Yeah, all I really lost, I lost a little bit of definition in the eyebrow, which I'm not crying about, right? So I'm going to leave these stray hairs to the side for now, and we're going to work on this, adjusting the eye color and the shadows in here. So what I'm going to do first is make a new layer. But instead of a standard layer, I'm going to click here and make an adjustment layer. What I'm going to adjust before anything else is our curves. That'll be the adjustment layer we use. So what I want to do is adjust this. Her hair is going to look crazy. Her hair is going to look super washed out. What I want to do though is I want to adjust this curve so that within that eye socket where that shadow is, I want that to be a bit more prominent, a bit brighter. So I'm adjusting my curve there. I'm also not going to worry about what happens to the center of the eye, the actual eyeball or eyelashes, because those aren't what I'm adjusting. So that's probably pretty good. Let's take a look. If I turn off this layer, that's pretty solid. Might make it a tad darker, or change its opacity. But for now, let's work with that. So now we have the option to mask everything. What I have here over here is this little box is a mask. When it's all black, the mask is off. You can't see the effect. Whatever is white, you can see. So now I grab my paintbrush, make sure that I'm set to white over here, and anything that I paint has the effect applied. Let's undo that. I'm going to change up my brush from, I had it to the charcoal pencil brush, to a soft round, and my pressure defines my opacity. Let's make it a bit bigger. My photo's fairly large. That's good. 90 or so is pretty good. So I'm going to zoom in, and you'll see that everything I draw over is brightened up a little bit. Now, I don't want to get rid of everything, but I also have a lot of control in adjusting this stuff and turning it off, turning it on, erasing anything I don't like. Like for here, the bridge of her nose. I want it a tad darker to match down here, right? So first of all, I'm just going to give us a little bit here. There we go. And then I'm going to use my eraser with the same settings and just very lightly go over to darken that area. What am I talking about? Rather than use my eraser, I'll just switch to black, because because when I paint back over with black, the effect goes away. So I'll undo that and lightly paint over here with my black to give that bridge of the nose a little bit more definition. You'll note that, like, under her eyebrow, for example, is nice and bright now compared to original. It really pulls you in to her eyes. Very soon I'm going to apply different adjustment layers, or different curves adjustment layers to the actual eyes themselves to give them a lot more depth. But for now, let's finish up cleaning this area. One thing I don't want to touch is the hard line of this shadow. So I gotta be careful of that one. But think of this as, it's essentially putting on makeup with the computer. Not that she needs makeup, but for sake of this photo, what I shot isn't what I want to see in the end product. And so I'm cleaning. What's also awesome about this technique is it doesn't mess with our textures. All her skin texture is the same. It's just a different brightness. So I'm going to go through one more time and darken up again above her cheek, her nose. There we go, I just brightened a little bit. And we can do this over and over and over again. We can apply multiple different layers of curve adjustment, or really any adjustment. So the only other adjustment I'm going to make a slight change on her eyelids. Brighten them very slightly. There we go. I'm going to do the same process over here. There's less I need to deal with just because we have nice shadow because of her hair. Let's brighten up in here. Sorry, I'm looking over to my other screen because it has a different color setting, which I actually prefer to look at. So now if I turn off my curves layer, you can see we've lost a lot of this this shadow in here. Rather than apply depth to her eyebrow ridge and her eye sockets, I'm applying depth in her eyes and eyelids to draw us into the photo. That said, I am going to go one last little trick. I'm going to change up my black to a kind of a medium gray. Just an in-between state for our mask, right? And what I'm going to do is real quick and very lightly go over all this area real quick just to even it out. Just so we don't have any patchy areas when it all is said and done. Same with under her eyebrow, or under her eyelid. I'm going to clean up the edge of that. There we go. Again, sorry, I'm looking back at my other screen because I like the settings on that screen. I don't love that little spot there, so I'm going to apply some white there. There we go. Give me a quick second. I'm going to grab a sip of water. Okay. So now, how do we edit this image, or these eyes, to make them really pop, right? The first thing we're going to do is play with the light in the eyes. So you can see in the reflection we have a few different highlights, but ultimately our main highlight, is our main highlights come in on this angle, right? They're coming in on this lower angle. Our key light's probably somewhere around. What did I do to my layer? Somehow I got rid of my layer, so I'll just do that. So, our light's coming in to her eyes from this angle, which means our key light's somewhere over here. But then we have these secondary highlights coming from pretty much this entire range. These upper hanging lights definitely continue further down the room. What we need to worry about predominantly is our key light. That's going to shape the eyes for us. Everything else we need to take into consideration, but we need to worry about the key light more than anything right now because we're trying to create this depth, right? Let's get rid of this. Let's turn off that layer. So the first thing I'm going to do is make a new layer, and I want to So yes, okay. I have two options. I can either start to shape the eyes or start to color the eyes, both of which contribute to one another. I think I'm going to start to shape them by changing the lighting on them. So the first thing I'm actually going to do is I'm going to create another curves layer. I'm going to push my highlights up pretty high. So I'm going to bring my highlights up. Come on. It would help if I didn't keep making here. I'm going to use my mouse for this, just for a bit more precision. There we go. So we're pushing our highs on this one. Then what I'm going to do is make another curves layer. Turn that off for now. Make a curves adjustment layer where I really kind of just bring up my mids a bit. Nothing too crazy. And then I'm going to make a fourth layer where I really darken my shadows. There we go. Man, it looks way better on your end than it does on my little display here. But, oh well, I'll work with it. So what's awesome about each of these, let's invert their masks for now, is that by applying each of these, I can start to shape the eyes. I can emphasize the highlights or shadows of specific areas. So for example, in my curves 2, is my highlights, if I'm not mistaken. So I'm going to rename it. Come on, let me name it. There we go. Highs, mids, lows. So I'm also going to group all of these. Call it curves. There we go. So what I'm going to do is brush each of these in where I want to emphasize them. And we're going to work with the natural light that's already here. So for my highs, I already got white selected. Let's get off of my pencil tool and on to pressure, opacity, and flow. So with my highs, I can really bring up my highlights and kind of work with the curve of the eye. The thing to keep in mind is I'm not just drawing over the parts that are highlights. I'm really drawing them out to shape this eye. I could do the exact same thing on any part of this photo. I'm just generally going to brighten this eye up a little bit. So I'm applying highlights to pretty much everything here on the eye. But bear with me for a second because I'm going to make a big change in just a moment. There we go. So there's a lot more depth there already. Let's throw some depth into this one. I've brightened up all the color in her eye, which is actually green, but we're going to play with a bit more gray in a moment. I want to add a bit more highlight in here. And then we'll just kind of feather out and highlight in a moment. There we go. So, got my highs pulled. Much more, it already works more in this eye, but this eye we'll work with in a moment. I'm going to jump right to my lows and start to play with them. So I don't want to be too much with this, but you have to keep in mind that on the opposite side of where our light is, we have a bit of darkness. So I'm playing with that now. We also want to throw more darkness into little corners, nooks and crannies of the eye. Nothing too crazy. So I'm going to pull a little less darkness in here as we work. But that's some good depth already. We'll also be playing with color to emphasize this as well. Let's throw some darkness in here. Some shadow on the opposite end of the eye from our key light. There we go, and then here's where I throw in my mids. Just kind of between everything to balance it out. You have to keep in mind the mids do actually still brighten our shot. So don't pretend like they're just going to balance everything, but it really fleshes out our eyes. Now, honestly, I could spend hours just going over and editing eyes. It's one of my favorite things to do. But just to give you an idea of the difference this layering makes. That's our original shot. That's our newer shot. And so by working with these curve layers, we can really work on shaping a person's eyes in Photoshop. Really adding some depth to them, which is why I took so much depth out of this. Where's my cursor? There we go. I took so much depth out from the eye socket area so that we could really draw into her eyes. So the next thing we're going to do is work with color. So I'll turn my curves layer off, or turn my curves, collapse that layer, pardon me. And I'm going to jump right into my layer 3, which I moved down. There we go. So now we need to think about what colors we're going to really emphasize in our shot. And in this case, I'm not loving that eye. I'll work on that later. In this case, I really want to emphasize these grays. But I can't just make her eyes gray. It doesn't work that way. There's a lot more depth and a lot more color in eyes than we think. You can't just say someone has green eyes, someone has blue eyes, someone has brown eyes. There's different colors at work in there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my sample tool and just sample this color and see what we get. There we go, okay. So we're working with this because our shot is reddish. We're working with this reddish gray, but ultimately it's more like a blue that we're working with. So I'm actually going to change our hue slightly more bluish green because that's the color her eyes are naturally. So I've got this kind of mid bluish green. What's also interesting about eyes is that our key light, for reference, coming in from this side, our key light is going to be on the opposite side of our saturation, our color in the eyes. And so when we throw eye color in, when we emphasize it, we're not going to throw it right where this highlight is. We're going to throw it on the opposite end where the shadows are. Only the littlest highlights will come out on this end. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take our brush tool. I'm going to make it slightly smaller. 14 is probably good. Yep. And I'm just going to kind of draw in some color. So we're working with this gray as our mid-tone, right? So I'm not going to go too crazy with it because I want room for our shadows and our highlights. I'm actually going to undo that and redo it with some more definition. I want a harder brush. Let's close that. Let's turn off our layer 2 again. There we go. So I'm going to switch up my brush to something a tad harder. Let's do 69. Nice. Still no. Good, but not fine enough, so we'll reduce the size even more. I really want to be able to scribble. I want to be able to scribble in these colors. 5 should be good. There we go. And we don't have to be super clean about it, we just need to get it in there. And if we don't like something we did, we can erase it, because it's on its own layer. So let's get that color in the other eye as well. There we go. So we're going to now add another layer. And we're going to take this gray and we're going to increase its brightness. I'm also going to add a bit more green into this one. So our highlights are just going to be kind of on the fringe of our eye. We can draw over what we've already drawn. That's no problem. Let's see how that looks on that one. So you'll note I'm using this other technique where I'm just kind of adding these spots. That's because our highlights aren't consistent throughout someone's eyes. Our highlights are going to just catch little bits of light and reflect them, like casting light through a diamond. Finally, I'm going to create one more layer. I'm going to find my color. There we go. I'm going to go with something a bit more blue and a tad darker but more saturated. That's going to be our shadows. So we don't even have to cover everything. You'll see in a moment what we're going to do to kind of make this not look like I just drew on an eyeball. I'm also going to add some shadows in here, right at the fringe edge. Same with this one. Less so because her eye's a bit more closed. So we're not quite seeing the top of it. Okay. So I'm going to switch to my mouse for this one to adjust how this works. There we go. So what I'm going to do is change my blending type from normal to, let's try soft light. Try hard light. Just try our different light options. I like hard light, but we're going to punch this one up in a little bit. So in the case of our highlights, I'm going to go soft light. And the same with our blues here, I'm going to... Actually, I might go overlay on everything. There we go. Not quite getting the color I want. And so what I'm going to do is within all of that, I'm going to apply another curves. Bring up our highlights one more time. Actually, before I do this, let me double check what it looks like on your guys' end of things. Bear with me for a second. I have to move my display. I actually don't mind how it looks on your guys' end. Again, my monitor is shot. It's the next thing I'm going to be replacing. What I do want to do for the final product is I want to draw this color around the eye a little bit more to flesh it out. Because at the end of the day, we're trying to strike a balance between grabbing color from this this paint sample, but also playing with the natural color of her eyes. So that's why I didn't use gray for all of this. I used a bit of blue, I used a bit of green. I'll probably throw some yellow in there to flesh it out. Let me get rid of this curves layer. Yeah, that's a noticeable difference. So I'm working primarily with my with hard light and soft light for these different colors I've applied. And then again, we have this curves layer, which gives us some depth to the eyes. And while we're on the subject, I'm going to adjust this highs slightly. Let's make our brush bigger. Let's make it opacity and flow.
In this galaxy in my mind I've made for you. This tragedy comes to life out of the
There we go, that's a tad better.
and I don't know why, but I feel most alive when
I just felt like there was too hard an edge on the highlights on her eyes.
that they'll lead to you. There's a
So let's see, what else can we work with right now? Well, the first thing I'll probably do at this point is I'm going to get rid of a bit more of this orange and pink in our background. So I'm going to go to color balance, do it for me. Yeah, that'll do just fine. There we go, so a bit more cyan between the two. Let's see. Don't need more green, let's bring in more color. Let's adjust our yellow and blue a little bit more to the blue side. On the main display, that what you guys should be seeing, I think it looks pretty good. So we'll turn off, or leave that up there as its own layer. There we go. Pretty solid, I'd say. So at this point, it's pretty much a matter of what do we want our subject to be, what do we want in the foreground, what do we want in the background. So I'm going to do a little bit of cropping probably by the time this is all done to kill this banister and this sign here. And we'll just work with the lights. I'll cut down on the ceiling a little bit. But there's not really much to edit there, simply because there's nothing I need to correct. It's all a matter of there's nothing wrong with the background. There's no thing I need to remove. There's no thumbprint over the lens or anything like that. It's mostly a matter of playing with the light, playing with the shadow. I'll probably darken the background and leave her a bit brighter. I also still have some hair to deal with. Just a little, though. Rather than cut out a whole mask of darkening the background, what I'm going to start with is actually just cleaning up this paint sample that she's holding, getting rid of any texture on her face that I'm not like the biggest fan of. Because again, I'm going for an artistic look, not so much it's not a headshot. It doesn't necessarily need to be authentic. I'm already mucking with the color of her eyes. Might as well adjust some other things. So let's get to it. So the first thing I'm going to adjust here, let's zoom out one more, is some of the staining on this card here. I want it to look, I have no problem with it looking old, because she did just pick it up in a random shop, but might as well clean it up a tad. So I'm going to go right to our clone stamp brush, hold down Alt, find a section I like, and start stamping in. Let's do that on a new layer. Actually, rather than on a new layer, let's go back to layer 1, the same one we're adjusting our hair, and stamp it. There we go. So I'm going to grab from different areas to get this kind of mix of color in here, so that it doesn't look like one big blotch. We can also accomplish this now that everything's kind of cleaned up on it. We'll take our eraser, make sure that we're on a brush that's good for this. Pressure is opacity, yep. And we'll just go over the very edge of it, very lightly, to kind of blend everything out. And now I see that my splotch is back a little bit, so we go back to the tool, we grab another section, and we paint over. I'm going to paint out extra, so that when we go back to our eraser, we can lightly go over the edge, and we're not revealing any splotch. Looks pretty good to me. So we want to keep all this edge and texture on this. I don't want everything to be a clean edge. Sometimes I would, in this case I don't. So now I'm going to go to spot removal and just deal with anything noticeable. It's like that guy right there. Oh, help if I wasn't on eraser. Spot removal. There we go. One that I do dislike, and it's always a balancing act between removing blemishes and all of that on someone's face and keeping things authentic, right? This isn't exactly a shoot where I broke out 200 different lights and 3 different lenses to shoot the perfect photo. This was a spur of the moment thing, and so I'm not trying to fix every little blemish you might see. That said, what I tend to do is I ask the question of whether or not someone could have dealt with this problem themselves. So in this case, it was the end of a long night. Bit of mascara at this point had kind of fallen onto her cheeks, and so we're just dealing with that. If we'd taken this photo 2 hours earlier, that would not have been a problem. So I have no problem saying, yeah, let's get rid of these little spots. But I'm never the kind to say, okay, let's remove someone's double chin without talking to them, without being asked to. That's not my jam. But the odd pimple, the odd bit of makeup, I'm not too worried about. There's a couple more up here I'll deal with. We also have to note that no one's really zooming in this far to the photo enough to notice that. But it leaves a bit of a texture. That is what my concern is. Because the smoother the skin, the more easily people are drawn into what I want them to see, in this case the eyes. If there's something in the way of that, that's a concern. Some of them I'll deal with, some I won't. There. I'm actually growing to like that one hair. I do want to deal with this one. Still a few spots over here. It's hard to tell what's what when you're so zoomed in. There we go. Undo that one. Let's see what happens if I try to deal with that. Yeah, I didn't love that highlight on the tip of her nose. Just a little bit distracting for me. So I dealt with it. Beauty. I don't plan to go crazy over all of this. Again, at the end of the day, it's not about the perfect photo of the perfect model with perfect skin. It's... Sorry. Ears get itchy with 2 headphones in. It's about the composition of the photo, the intention of the photo. And fixing every blemish on someone's skin is not the intention of this photo. Let me double check what else I can kind of get rid of. I want to fix up this one hair over on the side. This is a lot of photo editing, for the record. This is common for photo editing, I should say. Oh, got a follow. Thank you very much, Trepka, with a 3. Photo editing is a lot of going over these finicky little things and solving them, putting out little fires. Once you put out all the fires, you get the opportunity to start to look at things more creatively. Once everything is at a neutral place, that's when you can start getting more creative with it. So we got rid of that hair. I'm guessing now is when I start to look at darkening our background. Hello, ZapTrap08 and Trepka. I'm glad you enjoy my content. Fair enough on the second comment. That's your own. You do you. It's the best way to put that. How's it going, ZapTrap? Let's add a curves layer. Let's darken things up a little. Well, that's your call. Hello, 123 Gamer. Welcome to the Chill and Chat stream. Caught me in the middle of editing just a photo I took a while back. Where'd that curves there go? There it is. Vagary. Things are pretty good. Busy at work, just editing some photos. Finished class for the day. Thanks, Trepka. You seem to like walking this line of insult and compliment. I can appreciate that. But it is a dangerous line to walk, I imagine. So, just for anyone who is curious about the actual photography here, what I'm doing right now is I'm darkening up our background by using a curves layer and then a mask on top of that. Baggery, I am not sure what exactly that means. Trepka, fair enough. At the end of the day, as long as you're not a total jerk, all are welcome here. Let's invert that. Portuguese food, okay. The girls, my friend Jess, this photo's from, God, about a year ago now. Yeah, she's one of my friends. We all went out to an art crawl, which is like an arts festival, and I shot this photo. So this is what I chose to edit for my first kind of chill stream. Normally my other streams are actual classes. Let's collapse that. And darken all that. Will do. There is a chance she might tune in at some point. I did mention I'd be editing a photo of her. Yeah, over the next couple of weeks, I'm going to be mostly working on photo editing on this channel when I'm not busy with class time. Baggery, to get back to your comment about Franceschina, I assume? I'm not sure how you pronounce the CH there. What kind of food is it? I'm very much into food myself. And again, for those interested in the photography, this real quick pass on darkening the background. But that's the difference it makes. It really draws the background out. It gives us some depth to this photo. I'm going to clean up the edges here. But it really makes Jess pop off the background a lot. Trepka, I'm talking to a girl, but I'm nervous. I don't know how to ask her any tips. That's not really my area of expertise, for a couple of reasons. I suggest not drawing it out. Just be reasonable. Give it some time to make sure you guys get along and all that other nonsense. But don't hang on to a friendship for 4 months and like thinking that, yeah, one day I'll ask her and she'll say yes. Just go for it. Hell, at this point, I have 2 friends who I've asked out at some point in our friendship. No shame in it. And they're actually 2 of my best friends. So let's clean up. What was I doing? Cleaning up this edge for our curves layer. So let's switch to white. Let's reduce the size of our brush to, let's say, 180. Trepka, I'm from Canada. There we go. Yeah, I'm from the Great White North. Hamilton, to be specific, if you happen to be from Canada. Yeah, I'm a teacher from Kosovo, okay. I have a few friends from out that way. Kosovo's Serbia? Or in and abouts, I think. Yeah, Balkan region. Okay, yeah. Yeah, I've never had the luxury of visiting the Balkan region. Closest I've got would be Czech Republic. No, Czech Republic. Poland is further. You'll have to bear with me. I have not studied geography in a while. How's everything going out toward Kosovo, like with COVID-19, coronavirus, all that stuff? Just out of curiosity, if you don't mind talking about it. Black. Highlights hair there. Lockdown, problems with Parliament. Yeah, I have no issue with Parliament over here in Canada, but I can empathize with the lockdown, the having to stay home. Hell, I'm one of the lucky ones. I get to teach from the comfort of my own home. I get to work. I get paid. I'm very, very lucky in that regard. Yeah, I'm on the right. But yeah, there's definitely been... The world's kind of turned on its head right now, isn't it? Yeah, I'm a journalism teacher, so I get to read up a lot about it. I get to talk to people, much like yourself, just about how things are going. And yes, I live for work, and not in a sad, upset with my life kind of way, but in a every day I get to do things I love. Yes, some people are. A few of my friends are in situations like that. It's unfortunate. It's all about a lot of it's about the grind. Some of it's society, and issues there. But at the end of the day, again, I'm very lucky to be in the position I'm in. Let's clean that up. Don't want our other subject of this photo, the color palette, to be too dark. I cannot sing you a good night song, mostly because I cannot sing to save my life. That said, my friend and fellow streamer, Ditzy Ghost, is online on occasion, and she does singing streams on occasion. She also does ASMR. But she's actually one of the people who helped me set up this stream. There's a stray hair there that I'm going to get rid of. Layer 1. That tool. Yeah, no worries, man. Thanks for tuning in and chatting. Not enough people actually join in chat. Have a good one. So, despite everything I just did for the backgrounds, I am back to cleaning up hair, because that is my life when it comes to editing photos. I don't like that. That's pretty good. Let's take the eraser tool and zoom in. I'm just going to clean up a couple of hard edges here. This one. There we go. Now we have hair, so I have to clean up again. There we go, and I'm going to wind up using the clone stamp tool. Sample there. That is not what I sampled. When am I streaming next? Well, I have a actual class stream tomorrow. And then after that, I would be streaming next Wednesday at 1 p.m. and then 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I'm not sure what that converts to for your time zone. But yeah, so I'll be on the best stream to tune into is my 5 p.m. stream every Wednesday. Because that's the casual, just doing whatever, talking to chat. Beauty. Now go get some sleep. I imagine it's fairly late where you are. That's a bit better. Yeah, I can accept that. Okay, I'm at an hour and a half. I'll go for a little while longer. Guess that I should turn up the music on my end. There we go. Looking at that all looks good. I could do with some depth to her hair, but I think this is a good place to finish off on this photo for now. So let's quick save it. Pull this up on the other side. Art crawl, Jess. Save it as a Photoshop. There we go. Let's see what else I can edit for today. Holiday train, Maggie shoot, art crawl. Let's see what I got from Bayfront. How does that look zoomed in? I'll mark that one. I might do that.
Oh baby, don't leave me going crazy 'cause I'm restless here. Oh baby, only you can.
Yeah, I'll go with the butterfly for now. If I chill around or stick around for a little longer than that, I'll probably do a sunset. Let's get that open. Give me 1 second. Pardon me, just answering text for a moment. There we go. I'm gonna take out that headphone. That one was bothering me. Okay, so what I'm going to do before anything else is adjust my adjust the exposure, adjust the settings on this photo before I really start making adjustments in Photoshop. Turns out I need this headphone. So there's honestly not a ton I want to do with this photo. It's already got some good edits done to it, or it's already shot fairly well. Adding a bit more contrast. Bear with me, I'm watching on this screen rather than my main one. Bring down the exposure a tad. Bring up our highlights a little bit. Okay, I'm brought down my shadows. Let's bring up the whites a little bit so I can get more of this depth in the picture. Same with bringing down the blacks a tad. Beyond that, I'm going to leave our special effects settings, texture, clarity, dehazing, vibrance, all that. I'm not too worried about that. What I am going to do is go into my HSL and start adjusting my colors a little bit. So I'm going to go to saturation and take my purples and kind of bring them up a little. I'll do the same with my magentas and a little bit of the blues. Nothing too crazy. I don't want it to look fake. But this will really start to draw out some of the color so that I don't have to worry about it too much in Photoshop itself. What else do we want to adjust? Nothing with detail. I don't need to worry about tone curves. Lens correction's not an issue. I don't want grain or vignetting right now. I'd say that's all pretty good, so I'm going to open this in Photoshop. So we got our butterfly nice and big. I'll probably crop in this photo a tad. So let's see how it looks. Yeah, it looks fine, even blown up a bit. So the first thing I'm going to do is start working with our curves. Because I really want to pull out some detail from the background without messing with our foreground too much. Let's pull up the low lights there, bring up our highlight. So what I've created here on our curves panel is what's called an S-curve. And an S-curve increases contrast in our photo. Look at it this way. This is more contrast, that's less contrast, right? Yeah, I'm liking the look of that. So then because it's on its own layer, what I can do now is I can adjust the mask, just like I've been doing with everything else. What I'll do... I'll draw in the negative space to start. So I'm going to work with my black brush. And let's see how big I want it. That's a good place to start, around 150. What kind of brush do I have? Oh, pardon me. Got pumped. Yeah, 158. Soft round, pressure on opacity and flow, that's pretty good. So what I'm going to do is draw over the stuff I don't want to be so dark. In this case, the butterfly, our foreground, right? So, there we go. So you'll notice it's not the easiest thing to tell. So if I draw over here, you can see I'm drawing in lightness, right? I'm doing the same thing on the butterfly. And you'll start to see this light outline around it. That's what we're going to get rid of next. But for now, it's fine. I just want to make sure that I've covered my bases on things like the flower. And I'm pressing pretty hard with this because opacity is part of our brush. Our pressure settings on the brush. That's pretty good. Let's give a bit of brightness to this guy here. This leaf up front. Let me close down my layers to see what's on that side. I'm not going to worry too much about this brown plant. I'm going to mostly crop him out. But let's get rid of the darkness on those first front two. And on our bug. Our little bug that's just chilling to the side. So now what I'm going to do, now that everything, if we turn it off and on, the effect is kind of a miss. But everything we want in our foreground is pretty much highlighted. Just double checking. Yeah. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to zoom in a little bit. And I'm going to switch our brush over to white. And what white does is it reapplies the effect that I initially placed. So now I just work lightly drawing in over that brighter edge. I don't have to press too hard. My brush, the harder I press, the more opacity there is. So the more flow. So I'm just going to lightly go over. If I happen to go over one or two little things, it's not too much of an issue. In fact, it kind of creates this halo effect, which is cool. It gives us depth in our shot. So I'm not going to worry about the legs too much because there's not much contrast to effect there. Drawing over the edge. For this edge. Drag the tool over. Very lightly go over this edge. That's good. That's probably pretty good. Then we work down the flower. I'm really only looking for stuff that stands out, where that highlighting is very obvious. So like in here you can see it. And again, I'm drawing over lightly so that it's like half opacity. Where I need to be careful about it is, well, definitely in these darker spots. So around this plant it's a bit more obvious. I need to be careful with our bug. I don't want to reapply contrast to him, just to give you an idea. There's not a ton of difference, but there's enough for my taste, especially because I'm going to be adjusting the curve layer again once we have our settings changed. So I completely drew over him again to make a point. What I'll do is I'll make my brush size real small, 25 pixels, and really zoom in on this bug, so much so that he's pixelated. There we go. So, can't really tell all that much. What we can tell is the background has way more depth to it. There's way more vibrance to it. You start getting these nice little kind of... let me switch to another layer. You start getting these weird little kind of fluffy shapes in here. Just like that. It's just kind of this... It's texture, right? It's not quite a bokeh effect or bokeh effect, but it's enough that our background's not just this green blob, right? So now what do we do? First of all, we go back into curves and we see if we want to adjust our curve even more. And here's where you really see, like, I can really show you the what's affected, what's not affected, right? Our butterfly is perfectly fine, our bug's perfectly fine, our plant is perfectly fine. So I'm actually going to undo. I'm not really worried about our highlights. I'm adding a little bit more black into the bottom. Just because we want to, again, increase the depth in this photo. And at the end of the day, if our photo only shows this much, we need our background to be as kind of flavorful as possible, right? The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add in another adjustment layer. And which effect do I want? Hue saturation might accomplish what I'm going for. Yeah, hue saturation will go for what I'm going for. So I'm going to set it to magentas, which means that I'm only affecting the colors that would be considered magenta, purple, a little bit of red. When I change the saturation, you can really see what I mean by that. It's only affecting the color of our flowers there, which is what I want. So I'm going to change my saturation to 0. Change the color of my flower if I really wanted to. I'm mostly concerned about know what? I'm going to leave that setting alone. And instead go into... No, not full. Pardon me. I'm going to go into another curves layer. And what I'm doing with this one is, for those who were around earlier, I'm dragging all our shadows nice and dark. Now obviously this is hideous, this isn't what we want for our final photo, but there's a point to all of this. And that point is I can mask out certain areas. I can also apply our curves layer in a different blending method. So if I go to something like screening, lighter color, overlay, soft light. I'm liking soft light. Yeah, I'll go with soft light and change our opacity on it to 80 so that the effect isn't quite as strong. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to invert our shot, and I'm going to very lightly, with like a 60 pixel brush, very lightly just draw with white over the shadows of this flower. I'm being very careful not to press too hard. I'm being very careful not to stray outside of the flower. Ultimately, this is only affecting the darkest parts of the flower, but I don't want to accidentally go over a highlight and mess up its kind of its balance, right? So minor difference, but again, if I want to, let's increase that to 100%. And let's change it back from soft light. Let's see what just normal looks like. Yeah, I don't actually mind that. So next, I'm going to take a look at our butterfly. Zoom in on him. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a layer. I'm going to use our eyedropper tool to sample this yellow that's on the butterfly. Let's see if there's not a more slightly vibrant yellow. Yeah, that works. It's like a dusty mustard kind of color. But what's awesome is I take that color, add some saturation to it, but leave it just as bright. And I'm going to draw over it. I'm going to draw over these, there we go, these spots. I should, we'll just try it with these first, and if it works, I'll do it with the other. There should be a blend that, yep. Depending on the blending method we use, we can emphasize the highlights and not have to worry about the shadows. So even if I drew over the dark part of the wing, we're not seeing that like we would if I left it in normal. Let's see what one looks kind of best to me. I'm going to look at this screen for that. Different, subtract, so yeah. Hue, color, yeah. I'm going to go up. There we go. Darker color, linear burn. I'll go with color burn. Let me pull this over to my other screen just so I can see what it looks like. Yeah, I don't mind that at all. So, in this same layer, now that we are set to color burn, I'm going to draw in more of that yellow. Anything that looks too out of place, I can always erase if need be. I'm not in love with it, but it's also hard to tell from the screen. Yeah, I can work with that. So I'm then going to do the same thing and sample there we go. There we go. It's that little peacock blue. Let's see what our brush does when we draw over. That's a little bit dark. Let's see how it turns out. I'm actually not hating it. Let's go back now to that yellow color. The last one I want to emphasize is the orange. So again, I'm sampling the orange. There we go. Move my brush. There we go, sampled the orange. We're going to paint over the orange. And from what I'm seeing on mine, it's really burning it dark, but it doesn't look too bad on the other monitor. Let me double check. Would help if I used my mouse. There we go. Yeah, I actually don't mind that too much. The colors are nice and vibrant. The greens aren't playing too difficult with it. So let's try to accomplish a similar thing with a new layer in the flowers. So we're going to use our eyedropper, select some nice lavender or magenta, and then using our brush, what I'm first going to do, I'm first just going to paint over a bit of everything. There we go. This we have to be a bit more careful because there's more colors in play here. But let's just see what this does as a whole. Scrub over that. I'm being real quick and sloppy with it, just to see how it turns out. Okay, that's good enough. Let's see what we can do with different blending techniques. Yeah, our darker colors are lightened. I don't mind it too much in the bottom. I don't love it up top where everything's in focus. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch to my eraser. Make sure that's at a nice, decent size. 200 is good. And then set it so that really quick. There we go. Push over. There we go. Let's see what happens now. Good. I'm really liking having that darker purple hidden in here where everything's out of focus. But up where it's crisp, it's a bit too on the nose, a bit too obvious. Also, pardon me for a quick second. There we go, got the cam back. There, not that I plan to stream for a whole lot longer, but might as well have the cam while I'm online. So, at this point, I'm liking the color of this shot more or less. I'm liking our texture. What I am going to do is I'm going to sharpen things up a little bit. And the way I get that is Control-Alt-E. Pardon me, it's hard to remember key bindings. There we go. Control-Alt-Shift-E. That gives us a complete copy of everything below this layer. Then I'm going to do Control-Alt-U. Yes. To desaturate our photo. And then I'm going to set this layer to overlay. And so everything looks awful. But once I go up to Filter, Other, High Pass, I can really start to play with how much I want to sharpen things up. Now I want to do this within reason. I'm digging somewhere around there. And so now I'm going to mask this layer and invert the mask. And then I'm just going to draw over everything I want to sharpen. Again, I'm doing this with a pretty soft brush. That way it's not just this hard line in how sharp things are. So I'm just going to quickly brush over our flowers. Just the parts that are in focus. I want to sharpen up the legs of this butterfly. Then I'm going to sharpen pretty much all the hard edges and all the vibrant colors on this butterfly. I don't need to worry about the front of the wing, this black area here. Also going to sharpen up our little bug over here. So now when I turn off that layer, you especially see the sharpness appear and disappear in the flower. So, and much like anything else, I can play with our blending options just to get a different effect. I kind of like linear light on my monitor, and it looks pretty good on feed. Give me a quick second. Yeah, I'm digging linear light. It's nice and sharp, nice and clean. So then the last thing I'm going to do, well, first I'm going to File, Save As, And I'll call this one Butterfly. Save it as a Photoshop document. That way, if I ever want to come back and fix it, I have the full photo with all the edits saved. But now what I'm going to do is I'm going to crop it into... I always like... I'm going to go with 1 by 1 just so I can throw this on Instagram. Okay, so what I'm going to do, I love this cropping right here. I have the bee, or the bug, and the butterfly on our rule of thirds axis. I also have most of this flower on our rule of thirds axis, or a good chunk of it, everything in focus. So I'm going to accept the change. That doesn't remove any of our photo. It still exists. Hit cancel now. And now I'm just going to go in with our layers, go above everything with our own layer here, and I'm going to use our clone stamp tool to get rid of this, just this one leaf at the bottom. It's really bothering me. So I'll zoom in a ways. I'll come down here with our clone stamp tool fairly large. Yeah, that works. I'm just going to start... Actually, rather than our clone stamp tool, I'm going to use our spot healing brush. Run it over once. There, that dealt with a lot of our problem right there. Run it over a nice hard edge there. Don't like that one. So I'll undo it. This is where we get our clone stamp. We find an area we want to work with. I want to work in these highlights here. And I can start to kind of draw in. And like always, I'm going to draw my clone stamp tool out larger than the thing I'm removing. So that... Digging that. All those. Come on. There we go. I'm digging this vibrant green. I just don't know where to grab it from. Let's try there. So I keep sampling, I keep grabbing, I keep moving, because we don't want too much of any one place in all of this. And so what I'm doing is I'm adding all this texture, because at the end of the day, what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab another layer, add a filter to it. I'm going to go for Gaussian blur. Oh, apologies. Control-Shift-E. There we go. I'm going to apply Gaussian blur. Oh, there are my settings. They popped up on my other screen. I'm going to go real light on this, just enough that that's not really recognizable, right? Seems... I'll call 13 a good number. That seems to be a good place for this. There we go. Of course, I don't want to leave my entire footage like this, or a shot like this, so I'm going to add a mask. I'll invert the mask. And I'm just going to apply the lightest touch to that area. To kind of disguise it. I'd call that pretty good. So when we zoom out, if you didn't see the original photo, you wouldn't know I edited that. And that's the best rule of thumb to work with. What I'm not loving is my sharpening mask here sharpens too much around my bug. I'm going to quick clean that up, and then we'll save this photo. I'll get it out on Instagram. And hopefully it will be a success. I'm going to switch to my black brush. Clean that up. There we go. Just the middle of the bug is sharp. There we go. I'll say, yeah, linear light still looks good. So that's all good. The last thing I want to do is apply. Yeah, I'm going to apply a vignette, but I'll do it after all is said and done. So let's save this one again. I'm going to save it as a cropped version of Butterfly. Butterfly crop, all caps. There. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click on my layers and I'm going to go to flatten image. That throws it all into one big layer. This should always be your last step. Never do it partway through, because if you do too many steps after it, you can't recover everything. I can't, like, right now, yes, I can go back and get all my layers. If I do 50 different edits and decide, man, I needed to adjust layer 1, I'm out of luck. So I'll redo my flatten image because this is my last step. I'm going to go into filter. I'm going to go into camera raw filter. Camera raw opens up. And I finally want to go into post crop vignetting and just add, I'll add some vignette. I'll stretch out the midpoint. I'll decrease the feather a little bit. And I'll say that's pretty solid. So I'll hit OK. Finally, I'm going to my image size. I'm going to change it to, because I can never remember the numbers. I know Instagram tends to display at 1080 by 1080. It's a full HD as a square. What I tend to do, I'll reduce this to 75. Change my height to 1080. And then I increase my resolution to 150. So it automatically doubles my height and width. I always put out pretty much double what I need, just in case I need to crop in, I need to clean anything up. I have 50% extra space to do that, or 100% extra space, double. So, and I'll know that I didn't lose quality if my resize shrinks down. If it goes bigger, I probably reduced my quality. But in this case, it should be fine. So finally, the last thing I'm going to do is double check that my color profile is correct. So I go up to edit, I'll go to convert to profile, and the screen opened up on the other side like it always does. Right now it's set to Adobe RBG, which is great for editing in Adobe, but when I throw it onto the internet, this image is all the colors will go just a little bit wonky. So I'm going to make sure that my destination space, my destination profile, is going to be working RGB, specifically sRGB. That's the IEC is essentially internet standard. So I hit OK. And then finally, I save it as, and I'll throw it over here. Instead of saving it as a PSD Photoshop document, I'm going to save it as Butterfly JPEG. Save. And we get another little screen pop up. And let's see. If I save it at maximum quality, it's 3 megabytes. I'm not too worried about that. That's a decent size. So I hit OK. And let's open up the final product. I'd say that's a pretty solid photo, and I edited that in 30 minutes, 40 minutes, nothing too crazy. So with that, I'll throw it on my Instagram. For the record, my Instagram is This Aren't Photography. Let me throw up an image. Come on. There we go. Yeah, 1000 pixel grid is fine. So my Instagram is okay, I'm gonna undo that because that was terrible writing. It's at this underscore ARNDT. You know what sucks? Writing on a tablet sucks. At this ugh. This aren't photography. Should have gone with a rectangle. So yeah, that'll go up on my Instagram. Just because I think it's a nice little photo. For those who caught the beginning of stream, that photo I'm going to continue working on in my spare time, and hopefully I'll be able to show it off in the near future. Here on Twitch, on Instagram, wherever it winds up. For those who are watching this after the fact on YouTube, thank you for checking out my stream, checking out my video. Pardon me. And thanks for sticking through with thanks for sticking through to 2.25 hours of me streaming for some fun. On that note, I hope everyone's staying safe. I hope everyone's staying informed about what's going on. Hope everyone's washing their hands. And that's about it for me today. So, have a good one.